In the 12th and 13th centuries, the kings of Castile were the most powerful Christian rulers in Iberia, and the most aggressive patrons of the Reconquista. They funded campaigns against the Almoravids and Almohads. They commissioned churches and monasteries. They wrapped their wars in the language of crusade. And yet, when they died, they chose to be buried in robes of Islamic cut, shrouded in Arabic inscriptions, beneath the vaults built by craftsmen who had inherited the full decorative tradition of al-Andalus. Las Huelgas, the royal monastery near Burgos, is the place where that paradox takes its most concentrated form. You enter the Capilla de Santiago through a horseshoe arch in the caliphal style. Its vousars of brick laid in the tradition of Toledo, and also found on the gates of the city of Burgos. Its impost rests on two marble capitals salvaged from Medina al-Zahra, the center of caliphal power of the Caliphate of Córdoba. These are not decorative citations, they are material arguments, the stones of a caliphal structure transplanted into the heart of a Castilian monastery, where Cistercian nuns prayed for the souls of the Castilian monarchy. Beyond this first threshold, a second arch rises, larger and more commanding, built again in the tradition Castilian-sponsored craftsmen had absorbed from their Andalusi neighbors. This arch was almost certainly the work of mudéjar artisans, a community of Muslim subjects pegged to the royal establishment who lived nearby the monastery of the nuns and maintained the fabric of the complex over generations. They were subjects of the Castilian crown, and they built its royal monuments. The visitor stands not yet inside the chapel proper, and already the monastic complex has spoken in two architectural languages at once, with one of the first Gothic churches of Spain nearby. You pass through this arch, and then you look up. An extraordinary vault opens above you, its wooden armature covered in a dense field of 8 pointed stars, painted in red and gold against deep brown and white, with accents of a dark color at the margins. At the center, a gilded muqarnas medallion anchors the composition, radiating outward like a sun. This is a kuba, a domed or vaulted canopy that in the Islamic tradition marks spaces of sovereignty and sanctity. Here, in the Capilla de Santiago, it marks the space of death. The scholar Razan Francis has argued against the long-standing assumption that this chapel served as a site of royal investiture, that it functioned primarily as a funeral space. The burial areas identified in its vicinity, the processions that almost certainly terminated here, and the presence of Arabic inscriptions related to death suggest that the chapel was oriented not towards coronation, but towards the grave. In her reading, the vault above you is not a canopy of power in the political sense. It is a canopy over the dead. At the center of the chapel, framed by the articulated geometry of the space, stands a carved wooden statue of Santiago, St. James, patron of Castile's holy wars, the warrior saint whose intercession was invoked in campaigns against the Muslim south. He stands quietly, spotlit against the medieval stone, while above him the stars of the red ceiling rotate in their gilded patterns. Running along the rectangular base of the kuba is a band of Arabic verse. My trust, my hope, you are the aspiration, you are the benefactor. Bring my deeds to a good end. Even stripped of any explicitly Islamic reference, the poem functions as a meditation on death. It binds the patron's earthly deeds to the hope of divine acceptance, giving voice, in Arabic, in the vocabulary of Islamic devotional poetry, to a Christian eschatological longing. Why was a Christian monastery even using inscriptions in Arabic? Weren't the Muslims their enemies? This is not the product of ignorance or careless borrowing. The adaptation of this verse, the careful editing that removed overt Islamic references, while retaining the emotional and theological weight of the original, points toward precisely the opposite: deep familiarity with Islamic literary tradition, funerary practice, and perhaps the polemical and exegetical literature that circulated in the orbit of learned courts. Whether this knowledge resided within the royal court itself, or with the craftsmen and intellectuals of the royal workshop, the result was the same: a deliberate reorientation of shared forms toward a Christian vision of death and salvation. Looking towards the far end of the chapel, 2 scallop shells crown a pointed horseshoe arch, whose alternating vousards, some plain and some carved, are framed within an alfice of flowing vegetal atarique and circular geometric motifs. The scallop shell was the emblem of Santiago, the pilgrim's badge worn across Christian Europe. Yet the same form of shell had always appeared throughout buildings raised under Islamic patronage. Here, the pilgrim and palace vocabulary sit side by side, as if neither found the proximity strange. The kings buried at Las Huelgas dressed in aljubas, robes of Islamic cut and tradition. Yet some at Las Huelgas are actually unique for their fur interiors, to keep the wearer warm in the winter, showing how dress was adapted to specific needs. Their shrouds were woven with Arabic inscriptions. They inhabited, at the moment of death, the aesthetic and material world of the civilization they were in the process of conquering. And at the same time, it was the Castilians' own identity, having already worn and built in this style for hundreds of years. That they should have also chosen Arabic funerary poetry for the chapel that received their dead is entirely consistent with this pattern. They knew what prestige looked like. They knew what a royal necropolis, built in the manner of al-Andalus, was supposed to sound like. At Las Huelgas, then, 2 traditions converge. The monastery drew on the idea of the royal necropolis Eleanor's family had patronized at Fontevraud, while the hands that built and ornamented it worked in a vocabulary shaped by centuries of Andalusi practice. The Christian kings of Iberia had long absorbed the material and ceremonial culture of their southern neighbors, and Las Huelgas bears witness to that inheritance. Through the reused capitals from Medina Tal Zahra, through the Kuba, through the Arabic verses that circled the base of the Kuba, the authority of the caliphate persists, harnessed by the Castilians, not as a ruin, maybe as a trophy, and definitely as a living architectural grammar, absorbed and redeployed by a Castilian dynasty that understood, perhaps better than we sometimes credit, exactly what they were doing.